This one has my blood boiling tonight. A convicted sex offender facing charges for another case may be back on the streets. The prosecutors say there's nothing that they can do about it. Lonnie Johnson is the man's name. He's now facing 20 felonies for sex acts against a child in Utah. He's already been convicted of raping a girl in Washington State. Now, on his current charges, Johnson has been deemed incompetent to stand trial. That means prosecutors cannot prosecute him because of his current mental state. Okay, so here's basically what the doctors are telling us here. Johnson doesn't understand the charges against him and can't help in his own defense. Thus, no trial. Now, you think that someone who's incompetent would stay in a hospital, right? Wrong. Same doctors are saying he's not a substantial danger to society. Therefore, he cannot be held against his will in the mental facility, can't be prosecuted, and can't be detained. This is the same man who was convicted of raping a teen girl in Washington State and is facing 20. Let me repeat, 20 felony charges for rape, sodomy, and aggravated sex abuse of a child. So how could anyone find that someone with that record and that track record is not a substantial danger to society? To me, here's what the test should be. Doctor, would you let this man babysit your child or your grandchild? That's what I'd ask him. Joining us tonight, Craig Johnson, Deputy Utah County Attorney, Annie Cutler, reporter for Prime News affiliate KTVX, Courtney Pilchman, former sex crimes prosecutor, and Erin Runyon, founder of the Joyful Child Foundation. Her daughter, Samantha, was kidnapped and murdered back in 2002. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Annie, I want to go to you first. I understand you've just stepped out of the courtroom. What's the latest status? Have they released this man?
Well, here's the good news. They have not released him just yet. And as you mentioned, I did just step out of court, and here's what was said inside. Essentially, that Lonnie Johnson refused a second evaluation last night, so the prosecution's Hail Mary certainly worked for them today. So what's going to happen now is that the judge has pretty much given an order of detention. So Lonnie will be back in court tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Utah time. At that point, it will be determined whether or not now Lonnie Johnson qualifies to be civilly committed to the Utah State Hospital indefinitely. So if that answer is yes tomorrow, and that is what's decided, then yes, he will in fact remain at that hospital, and this case will essentially be dismissed. However, if that ruling is no, then the prosecution will go forward and file motions to continue to have him kept and have doctors continue to try to restore his competency so that he may eventually stand trial. I'm told that that process can go on for 2.5 years. Unfortunately, after that time, if he is still deemed incompetent to stand trial and there's nothing more that the Utah State Hospital doctors can do, then at that point, it's possible he may walk.
He walks out. Erin, my goodness, a case like this has to be, and I said making your blood boil. I mean, my goodness, we know his track record. We know the charges that he's facing now. We know who this guy is. I mean, how can a convicted child molester not be deemed a danger to society, Erin? This is crazy.
That's a great question, because that's the reality. We have no way of curing them in the first place, so to let this man out is insane to begin with, much less when he hasn't even served any time for the latest crimes. It's such a travesty of justice for child victims. It's outrageous. And the thing with civil commitment is that every state does it differently. And I guess maybe the silver lining is that this case is bringing attention to the loophole that is undoubtedly let other offenders out and may let future ones out if they don't fix it now.
Craig Johnson is a deputy Utah County Attorney, joins us by phone. Craig, I know you're as frustrated as all of us because, you know, this guy, I guess according to some sort of loophole in Utah law, may get out. I mean, he's never going to have to face those charges because he's not competent. He doesn't understand what's going on, yet he's not a danger. Doesn't that just... And common sense tells us if he can't even come into a courtroom and understand what's going on, how on earth can a man who in his past has committed these types of offenses not be deemed a danger, Craig?
Well, it's outrageous. We've been banging our head against the wall for the last several weeks, trying to find a way, thinking outside of the box, being creative with the way that we approach this case, because we do have victims and their families who are anxious to get justice, and we have the larger community to also answer to. Ultimately, we were able to be successful yesterday in having another psychiatrist attempt to interview him, and when that failed, I was personally able to file the civil commitment on behalf of these victims for Lonnie Johnson, and I will personally attend and aggressively advocate and argue for the civil commitment tomorrow, that he has a mental illness and that he is a danger to society. It's unconscionable that people have found otherwise, and I'm bound and determined to make my case tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it's unconscionable, and it's just not common sense. You've got someone who's convicted of this. He's facing more charges for the same offense, and yet he doesn't understand what's going on, but he's not a danger. I mean, what you got to ask the doctor, Craig, is ask any doctor that gives that opinion, ask the doctor, would you let this man babysit your child or your grandchild? And if they answer yes to that, then God bless them. Aaron, this is the one thing I always say about sex offenders, especially the ones that go after children, is they don't get better. They get worse.
Exactly. They do. Their victims get younger. Their crimes become more violent generally. And so we've got to, civil commitment is a tool, that one of the only tools that we have to keep these people behind bars where they belong.